Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance. Join our hosts as they discuss a wide range of topics and speak with leading cybersecurity, technology, and compliance experts. Now is the time for Secure Talk.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk. Secure Talk is brought to you by Adequest, your cybersecurity and compliance partner. My name is Mark Schreiner, and I will be your host for this edition of Secure Talk. Today, we're going to be talking to Rudolph Araujo from Awake Security, and we are going to learn how Awake Security helps companies to detect, respond to, and prevent non-malware attacks, or what they call living off the land attacks. Other people might call this fileless malware. And so we're going to take a look at some of the latest methods that companies are using to prevent those type of attacks. But first, Rudolph, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Mark?
Pretty good, pretty good. I'm up here in Seattle. Where are you based?
So we are based in Silicon Valley. So I'm at our Sunnyvale office in the Bay Area.
Sounds nice. How's the air down there? We've been combating a lot of forest fires up here, and we've been under haze for about a week. What's it like down there?
Yeah, it's been a little bit muggy in the mornings, but by and large, the air quality hasn't been terrible, I would say. Especially compared to last year when the fires were a lot closer.
Yeah. It just seems to be the luck of the draw. This year we have the fires. Last year you had them. Hopefully next year it'll be better. Well, hey, Rudolph, can you tell me a little bit about your background before we jump into what Awake Security does?
Sure. Yeah. So I've spent about coming up on 2 decades now in security. I started out at a company called BindView, where I was building, part of the research and development team, building vulnerability assessment checks. And that company eventually got bought by Symantec. I kind of boogied along before that happened and got a graduate degree at Carnegie Mellon in specializing in computer security. Joined a company called Foundstone, which specialized in security consulting, incident response, security assessments, things of that nature. Eventually, we got acquired by McAfee, which, as everyone knows, kind of got acquired by Intel. I left at that point and joined FireEye. Ran through that for about 4.5, 5 years. But while I was at FireEye, I transitioned from security consulting and advisory services to help kind of drive product strategy and how we talk about the company, to customers and prospects and things of that nature. And then eventually brought me to Awake Security, where I cover a little bit of this and that as a startup, as you can imagine, but primarily focused on some product stuff and again the marketing stuff and how we tell the story effectively.
Well, it's nice to talk to somebody with such a lengthy background in security, but in addition to your long time in the industry, you've also worked in a variety of companies and a variety of roles. So it probably gives you, I would say, a rather unique perspective. So tell us a little bit about Awake and what Awake does and what first off, what drew you to join the Awake team?
Sure. So maybe I'll kickstart with that. Right. Awake, was founded about 3.5, 4 years ago. Four co-founders. Michael Callahan was an entrepreneur in residence at our original investor, which was Greylock Partners, and Ashim Chan, who's on our board, was the person that, along with Michael, helped incubate the company while Michael was there. He recruited 3 other co-founders that helped tell a little bit of the story of the company. So first is Gary Golem, who's a security expert, spent again a few decades in security, responded to major breaches, and worked at a number of big security companies, including being employee number 1 at Cylance. And so he brought the security chops to the table, if you will. But the whole premise was, how can we extract valuable signal from network data, much like an expert investigator, someone like a Gary can do, but bring that capability to everyone, right? Even if you don't have those experts on staff. So build it into software using some of the latest developments, if you will, in data science and network processing, et cetera. So one of the co-founders, a guy named Keith Amidon, is really the network guru, if you will, at Awake, and he was a co-founder of a company called Introvert that eventually McAfee ended up buying, and it's McAfee's IPS now. So he's spent a lot of time really thinking about how to extract signal from network data. And then the fourth co-founder is a guy by the name of Debabrata Dash, who was a very early employee at ArcSight, helped build their analytics engine, Carnegie Mellon PhD in database and data sciences. So again, you can kind of see how that story comes together, right? We pull data out of the network. We then need to process it, at high speeds and be able to, draw signal from it using data science. And what signal we draw comes from the security aspects of it, if you will. So that's a little bit of the story. And along the way, Enrique Salem at Bain Capital Ventures came on board as well. So he led our Series B. So that's a little bit of the story of the company and how we got there. Does that make sense before I kind of dive in a little bit?
Absolutely. It sounds like you have a really impressive team. And I know that for myself and a lot of other people, when they consider joining an organization, I mean, the vision is really important, but also who's on board is probably equally, or if not even more important. It sounds like you definitely have an impressive team there, a lot of industry expertise and business success. So let's jump into the specifics of what Awake Security does.
Sure. So, we are focused on an area of the market that is called network traffic analysis. It's a relatively new emerging field, which is, how do you use network data to look for both the kind of the traditional types of things that, people have looked for on the network, but really also looking at things like insider threat or things like lateral movement or credential abuse, the types of things the attackers do once they're on the inside, right? So they've broken into your network or they're a malicious insider. What we often find is, attackers a lot of times are not using malware anymore, right? Because they're already on the inside. What are they using? They're using the same tools and techniques that your IT folks use or your developers are using, for completely business justified purposes, right? And so the example I often like to give is, Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. If I sent you an Excel document, there's probably literally thousands of Excel documents that are going over the wire in a typical organization. How do you spot that one malicious Excel document that maybe has a macro in it that is, going to do bad stuff on the particular endpoint or send data out, to the attacker, et cetera, right? So that's really the kind of the general problem area that we're focused on. The way we've approached it is kind of a threefold approach, right? So firstly, we sit on the network because the network sees everything, right? So we typically set up a tap or a span port, suck in, full packet data, and then, as I mentioned earlier, run analytics on it. The advantage of doing that is if you're doing anything in a typical environment these days, you're doing something on the network, right? You're sending packets, you're communicating with servers, whether they're internal or on the internet, what have you. So the network sees everything, and the network has a memory of everything, right? Because unlike an endpoint where maybe the attacker can delete his or her traces or delete log files, on the network, once you send a packet, you can't really unsend that packet, right? So the attacker has, in a sense, the least amount of control. So by sitting on the network, we're able to identify everything that's actually on the network, which kind of sounds trivial, but if you think about it, in this day and age with IoT devices and BYOD devices and shadow IT and DevOps, I'll stop at the buzzwords.
Well, it doesn't sound trivial to me. It almost sounds overwhelming. I mean, because you're going to have a huge amount of traffic, and you're basically looking for a needle in a haystack to spot. I mean, like you said, there could be thousands of Excel files being sent around simultaneously, and you need to pick up the one that is or identify any that are containing some kind of malicious code. So how are you going to do that?
Yeah, so once we've identified what's actually on the network, right? The actual devices, the users, the applications, um, we can start to ascribe all of the behaviors that we see on the network to those entities, right? So rather than telling you, hey, this particular IP address 10.1.2.3 is sending data out, that may or may not be interesting because humans typically, especially in a large network, have very little idea on what is 10.1.2.3, right? On the other hand, if I'm able to tell you, hey, it's Connor's laptop, and by the way, Connor works in your finance department, and you can see that he's had access to a number of sensitive file shares or SharePoint services, etc. You suddenly have a lot more context. And so that's kind of the fundamental building block on which Awake builds its detection and response technology, right? So on the detection side, what we do is we compare how every entity in the environment is behaving compared to all of the other entities in the environment, and specifically the entities that are most similar, right? Let's take an example. Let's go back to that Excel example that we talked about earlier. Yeah, lots of people open and share Excel documents in a typical network. But if I told you, hey, there's an Excel user or there's a device that is running Excel in the environment that is connecting to Twitter, and it's doing it every 12 hours, and no one else in the environment is doing that. You don't need to be a security expert or someone that's been doing this for 3 decades to say, wait a second, that doesn't smell right.
Right.
So that's a very simplistic way of representing how we detect quote unquote bad stuff, right?
So you're looking for some sort of anomalous behavior, essentially.
So that's part of it. Part of it is looking for anomalies. One of the ways we've approached this very uniquely is we don't base our anomaly detection on what you've done in the past, right? So for instance, the classic anomaly detection is, Mark has never used Excel to connect to Twitter. So Mark's connecting to Twitter with Excel anomaly, right? The problem with that approach is, let's assume, Mark, your device, and I'm just going to pick on you as my example here, so apologies up front.
No problem at all. Pick on me all you like. It's okay.
Let's assume, Mark, your device was already compromised before we came in, right? So we spent 30 days benchmarking your behavior and what quote unquote defines normal, but we've essentially benchmarked your bad behavior as normal, right? So if you were already connecting to Twitter or Dropbox or what have you using Excel, that behavior has now been classified as normal, and that's not really normal, right? So that's one challenge. The other challenge that I had a customer actually describe to me is, they deployed one of these anomaly detection solutions, and a couple of months go by, and they come into work one day, and the entire security team has boatload of alerts sitting in front of them that say everyone in the environment is exfiltrating data. Um, Now, that could be a really, really bad thing, but as it turned out, IT had rolled out a new backup solution. So every device was sending data out to this server, which was quote unquote bad, except it wasn't, right? Because this was a completely legitimate piece of software that was rolled out across the environment, but because it was not part of that baseline, this particular solution was saying that was bad. And so that's the challenge when you benchmark to past behavior. Either you're benchmarking bad behavior, or you have to constantly retrain the system as your environment evolves. And as we know in this day and age, no environment really stays static for that long.
Right, right. Okay, so you've got a different way of identifying anomalies. How do you do it?
Sure. So the way we approach it is we compare you to everyone else in the organization, right? So let's take that backup example again. When we're deployed in an environment like that, we're looking and saying, okay, this isn't a behavior that is unique to Mark. Everyone else in the organization, the hundreds of users, the thousands of users, or devices are showing that same behavior. It's very rare that an entire organization instantly gets compromised and everyone starts beaconing out. So that's the kind of knowledge, if you will, that when you apply to this very practical situation, you realize that, okay, this is probably not something bad, but something that was unexpected, perhaps, maybe for the security team, but not bad. So the way we detect anomalies specifically, we have another mechanism of detection, which I'll get to in a second, but anomalies specifically, we focus on what is happening in the rest of the environment, and specifically what is happening to people that are most like you, right? And how do we know who's most like you? Because again, it goes back to the fact that we track entities in the network, not individual IP addresses. So we know who else is behaving like you, who has similar, website accesses or file share accesses to you, down to, in many cases when we're deployed, we're able to identify people that are collaborating on similar projects. You might have someone from procurement, someone from legal, someone from sales, all collaborating on a particular RFP response, to a customer of yours, and we're able to identify those groupings, even though all of those people are not in the same department. So by comparing behaviors both against people that are most like you and across the organization, we're able to keep the false positives and the false negatives, very low from an anomaly detection perspective.
Well, that's really interesting. I'm seeing, so instead of taking kind of a historical, individual view in terms of what anomalous behavior you might flag, you're taking a role-based view and say, okay, we have these people, they're in similar roles, but 99% people are doing this, but they got this one guy, even though he's in the same role, is doing something a little bit different. Hey, maybe we need to check that out.
Right.
But
right, and it's real time. So there's no waiting for training to happen, and you're not constantly retraining, because again we recognize environments are dynamic.
Well, so that brings up the question: how do you identify who are in similar roles? Because you gave the example of, obviously you've got everybody in the accounting department is in, I guess, similar roles, and you've got your marketing team and your salespeople definitely are going to be doing different things on the platform than your accounting people, right? But those are kind of, I guess, simplistic definitions. You are examples, but you brought up the example of where cross-department or cross-functional collaboration, where they are doing similar things because they're collaborating. How do you identify all those kind of situations on the fly?
Yeah, so it goes back a little bit to kind of behavior tracking, right? I mean, if you think about a typical situation where maybe you're collaborating with someone in finance, and let's say you're in sales or you're in marketing and you're collaborating with someone in finance, what you'll find is that there's behaviors that will start appearing across those groups or across those individuals, even though they're in different groups, because they're collaborating on a particular project, or because they're both engaged on a specific internal effort around cost optimization or what have you, right? So when you watch those behaviors over time, and you can ascribe those behaviors back to those entities, right? Because those two individuals who are in finance and sales or marketing have probably had a whole slew of IP addresses over the course of time that you've observed them. So if your primary key, if you will, is an IP address, you can't ascribe those behaviors back. But if you know that this is Mark and he's connecting from his MacBook Pro, and he's collaborating with Bob in finance, who's coming from a Windows device, as intuitive as that seems, that's really all there is to it, right? So once you've figured out that these are the entities, you can start to say, okay, that behavior, we've seen that behavior with another device, and over time you start to see that, okay, hey, both of these devices kind of track pretty similarly, or both of these users track pretty similarly. Does that make sense? I mean,
absolutely,
simple,
yes.
No, and it is simple,
yeah.
Just hard to implement from a technology perspective.
Well, and you mentioned that you would talk about a second way to identify anomalies. What is that method?
Yeah, so the second way is actually not really anomaly based, right? The second way is what we call TTP detection. So think about it. Let's pick on the kind of the stuff that's in the news, right? So a lot of times you'll see, the way companies get targeted these days, there's no malware involved. Someone gets a spear phishing email that appears to come from Microsoft or Google, and it says, hey, your password's about to expire, or your password was compromised. Please click here to change your password, right? And these emails look very legitimate, etc. Now, what happens in that case is the attacker is spinning up these domains that look like Google, let's say, maybe they're goo-gl.co, or something that looks very much like Google but isn't Google. When you throw someone that has been in security even for a little bit, they can very quickly spot that. But when you throw that at an unsuspecting user that isn't thinking about security every waking moment, they fall into that trap, right? And perhaps the most famous example of this recently is you look at the hacks in the last election season, right, where the DNC, the DCCC, the Hillary Clinton campaign were all targeted, and it all came down to these non-malware techniques. So what we've built is a system that allows us to query the underlying network data that we've accumulated, this entity view of the world, and look for these tactics, techniques, and procedures, right? So TTPs, as is kind of commonly known in the industry. So what's an example of that? For instance, saying, hey, you've got, again, I'll go back to my Microsoft Excel example. When you have Microsoft Excel talking to a risky domain that's out on the internet, that may be one that is created to look like Google or look like Microsoft, you don't need any kind of deep, complex anomaly detection to say that's bad, right? So if I walked into you, Mark, and said, hey, you've got one user in your environment that has PowerShell, and they're using PowerShell to connect to Dropbox, that might be legitimate behavior, but you're instantly putting on your thinking cap saying, wait a second, I need to go pay a visit to that user, right?
Absolutely.
So that's really not anomaly detection. That's just saying, help me find these things that we just know are bad. We've just not had an easy way to look for them in the environment. And those are the TTPs that come out of these big hacks or the next big report that comes out of a threat intelligence or the FBI or what have you.
Interesting, very, very interesting. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the different methods you use to detect potential threats, specifically looking at the network signal to identify anomalies, and then also for this TTP detection. What about your response? I mean,
Sure.
your tools allow you to detect, respond, prevent malware. So let's talk about the response. How do you
Sure.
shut things down?
Yeah. So now that we've detected, the kind of the running joke in the industry is, the security team's work really begins then, right? It's not like they get to go home saying, hey, yeah, we detected something new, time to go home. Right. So one of the things that we focused on right from the get-go is how do we enable that response to be effective too? And here's another place that I'll maybe give you an example, right? So a lot of security tools, when they give you an alert, will tell you, hey, 10.1.2.3 did something bad. So then you spend the next 30, 45 minutes, and this is what we've seen in real world, well-equipped security teams. You're looking through DHCP logs, you're looking at DNS logs, you're looking at firewall logs, you're calling someone in IT saying, hey, what is 10.1.2.3? Maybe you figure out it's a Windows device. You're then trying to figure out, is that Windows device assigned to some user, or is it a thing that displays the agenda outside a conference room, what have you, right? So there's a lot of time spent with this context gathering. So we've automated that entire process because, as I said earlier, we have this entity view of the world that we're able to construct through network data. So in Awake, when you get an alert, either from Awake or if you're responding to an alert even out of your SIM, you have the ability to pivot to this full-blown device profile that we call Entity IQ that tells you, hey, 10.1.2.3, at the time that alert fired, was actually Connor's device, and Connor's running a Windows 10 laptop. Here's some information about it. By the way, it's been on these 6 other IP addresses the last week, and here's all of the threat behaviors that are ascribed to Connor's device. Right. So very, very quickly, as an analyst, you go from, hey, I see an alert in my environment, and again, that alert may have not even come from Awake. Maybe it came from your AV solution or your IDS or your firewall. But you have the ability to leverage the information and the knowledge, if you will, that Awake has about that device to speed up that investigation, speed up that response, and very quickly also determine who else might be targeted by that same threat, right? So again, that spear phishing example is a great one because when threat actors try and target an organization, they're not sending one email to one person. They're targeting a few different people, right? So to be able to say, hey, these 5 other people are also involved in the same project or are collaborating, I need to pay attention to those 5 people because maybe they're not compromised yet, but perhaps they've got that phishing email. I need to go talk to them. I need to go delete that email, what have you. So we've really focused on kind of optimizing that response and investigation process so that the analyst is not spending time kind of manually collating all of this data together, but we've correlated it, given them that information so that they can very quickly jump into a decision-making process, right? Whether it is deciding that they need to escalate this issue or they need to format a machine or what have you.
Excellent. Well, hey, let me ask you this. Let's take a broader view now and back up. And let's just say, you're out there in a competitive situation. There are other companies out there that have different methods for detecting and responding to malware, preventing malware attacks. I'm a CISO or CIO, and I'm like, look, we've been under attack. I'm tired of this. We need to invest. Why would I look at Awake Security, or why would I adopt your technology versus the competition?
Sure. So one quick clarification before I kind of jump to that, right? So we're really focused on what we call non-malware, right, or what you might hear as living off the land, right? So in that Excel example, there's no malware involved, right? I mean, Excel is a completely legitimate application. So that's one reason actually that.
Just to also clarify, I noticed on your website you use the term fileless malware. Is that basically lines of code that somebody's embedded? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So the most canonical example of that is when someone has JavaScript that's running in your browser, right? So there's no file that gets saved to your endpoint that a traditional antivirus solution or a sandboxing solution can detonate and say, okay, yeah, this looks bad.
Right.
Right. So that's a good example of it. Repurposing existing tools that might already be in the environment. PowerShell, we talked about Excel, tools that administrators can use, things like PSExec, et cetera. So those are all examples of, they're hard to detect because they can be used for completely legitimate purposes. In fact, in most networks are used for legitimate purposes. So how do you spot, it's not even a needle in a haystack, it's a needle in a haystack of needles, right?
Right. Gotcha.
So segueing then into answering your question, so that's actually one of the reasons, our customers actually like us, because we're focusing on a very, on a part of the spectrum that they don't have coverage today, right? Because, a couple of data points. A lot of our customers will tell us, hey, we don't see between 30 and 50% of the devices or the entities in the environment because people are bringing in their own phones, or people are bringing in thermostats that are plugged into the wall that are talking out to the internet, things of that nature, right? So we give them visibility into areas that they're blind to. The second thing is because we focus on this non-malware challenge, it's an area that their existing tooling, their existing solutions, aren't focused on. I think the main reason, though, to kind of get to the gist of what you were asking, the challenge we've had in the security industry for a while is every time you buy a security tool, you add work to your employees, right? And as has already been established, security teams are understaffed, they're overworked, there's not enough people, et cetera, right? So one of the things that we really focused on is how do we make the security analyst's life a lot more efficient, so that, again, like they're not painstakingly trying to gather context from many different places. We provide that for them. How do we give them ways of consuming the data that are not just restricted to, hey, here's our UI and here's our reporting. We give them a full-blown API. So if they want to consume that data in a different way or consume it in a different location, they have the ability to do that. How do we really change the way people think about alerts, right? I mean, the classical security dashboard is you come in, you log in, and you've got this thousands upon thousands of alerts that you've got to figure out, okay, which of these is important? Which of these should I care about? So instead, the way Awake's really try to differentiate itself is we don't give you alerts. What we tell you is, hey, here's the entities in the environment. Here's the devices, the users, the applications. These are the ones that are exhibiting the most risky behavior. And by the way, this is the name of that device. This is the user associated with that device. So it gives you a lot more business context, right? So again, if you knew that it is Connor's laptop, and Connor is someone that is pretty important in finance, you have a much easier way of saying, okay, you know what, this is something I really care about, versus me telling you 10.1.2.3 has had 7 really bad things happen on that device over the last 3 days.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, I have not yet to meet a security professional that says, oh, please give me one more tool that I have to learn how to use and interpret and integrate with my current security posture. So 100% agreement there. Let me ask you this, though. I mean, because every organization, they have different priorities, different signals will cause different levels of alerts. How do you, is there a setup procedure that when you go in and you do some kind of fact finding, or you have a business discussion that says, look, here are the activities that we're most concerned with. We'll prioritize this information. You said you don't issue alerts. You provide the information. But as a customer, can I pick and choose what I want to see?
Yeah, absolutely, right. So we recognize that we're not going to have all of the answers about what's important within an organization or not. So the platform, essentially the way I kind of like to describe it is, it has a view into what's actually happening on the network. But the customer and us in conjunction with the customer have the ability to ingest the more institutional knowledge, if you will, that exists about the organization, right? So I'll give you a good example of this. So one of our customers uses Awake to monitor people that either might be leaving the company or potentially are disgruntled employees or what have you. And the way they do that is they have the ability to tag those users, those devices, and annotate those devices with that knowledge, if you will, right? That is nowhere else. I mean, it's not something that you can pull out of a log file or out of the network or out of an endpoint. It's institutional knowledge that maybe you got from HR or finance or what have you. But by embedding that into the security system and ingesting that, you can influence the risk scoring. You can influence the detections, if you will. So for instance, you might not care if people are connecting to Dropbox normally, but if someone's on one of these lists, maybe you do care, right? Because now if they're uploading large amounts of data, are they uploading data because they're planning on leaving the organization and stealing some of the data with them? So that's a good example where customers can kind of bring in their own institutional or tribal knowledge into the system as well.
Oh, that's a great example. Well, hey, Rudolph, I really appreciate your time. We're kind of winding down on our time here, but what's up next for Awake? Both in terms of are we going to see you at any events, or do you have any business developments that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're we've been selling now for about a year. So we've gotten to a point where we found our sea legs, if you will, and now it's really a matter of how do we accelerate that process, right? So we have a new CEO that just started to kind of help us take us to the next level. A guy by the name of Rahul Kashyap. He was the former global CTO at Cylance. He's founded a couple of companies, led the McAfee Labs team. So he's again spent a lot of time in security. And so we're really focused on kind of taking the story to a broader audience now. So that's part of it. We were just at Black Hat, and we're speaking at Information Security North America in a couple of months. So lots of you'll definitely see a lot more offers at these events as we start to take the story broader and go from the friends and family, kind of working our own networks, if you will, to being bigger, having a bigger presence and a more pronounced go-to-market motion as well.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure with the talented team that you have and this very, very unique and seems to be quite powerful technology, I'm sure that you have a bright future. Any last comments that you'd like to share with the audience?
No, I mean, it's security is certainly a tough slog. So we appreciate what every single analyst and security team member out there does, and hopefully we have a chance to work with many of them in the future. And Mark, I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about Awake today.
Likewise, and it was great having you on the show. Thanks a lot, Rudolph. You take care.
All right, take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance. Join our hosts as they discuss a wide range of topics and speak with leading cybersecurity, technology, and compliance experts. Now is the time for Secure Talk.